Someone said something to me the other day that made me realize just how much I've changed. They told me that they know me really well and they know me much better than this other person that's currently in my life. And for me, that brought up some questions. What version of me do you know? Do you know the person that you met 3 years ago? Do you know the person that I was last year? Or are you listening to the person that I'm telling you I am now? Because those versions are not the same. And the interesting part for me wasn't just that I asked the question, but that I actually said it to them. Because the old me wouldn't have confronted that. So I want to talk about what happens when you change, but the people around you still see that old version of you. And maybe even more important, when you're the person that hasn't realized how much you've changed. Welcome to the Inner Launch, where we discuss how the small shifts on the inside have the power to transform the life that you create on the outside. This is the place where you create your next chapter from the inside out. I'm your host, Christina Volkovich, and today we're talking about what happens when you grow and the people around you may not realize that you've grown. Because growth can be gradual. It can be something that not everybody is going to notice. Maybe you're not going to notice it either from the day to day, but when you look back, you will. You live with yourself every single day. So for a lot of us, there isn't necessarily a big dramatic before and after. But then something may happen in life and you may realize, wow, I'm not the same version of myself that I was a year ago. I would have handled that completely differently. Maybe that looks like you spoke up instead of staying quiet. Maybe you set a boundary instead of trying to keep the peace. Maybe you made decisions without asking like 5 other people what they thought you should do. We are changing constantly. Maybe you stopped explaining yourself for the changes you've created. Maybe the best evidence of growth isn't how you feel, but how you actually respond to the other people around you. And today we're talking about that. If you haven't been following along to my other episodes, then you may not know that last year in about October, November, I had a very hard time in my life. I had 3 friendships that I thought were really good friends, and I came to realize that they were very one-sided, that I was putting a lot of time and energy into those relationships, and I wasn't getting the same thing back. And then I was very disappointed that I wasn't getting the same thing back. And it was a very hard decision, but I decided to not keep having one-sided relationships, to get one-sided relationships out of my life. And I did. And it wasn't a fun time. You know, it really brought up a lot of things in me that felt like, okay, am I just in these friendships, or like, am I holding on to these things just so I have people in my life? Like, why am I doing this? It brought up a lot of issues and a lot of questions. And with that, you know, I decided what was important and what wasn't. I let go of 3 who I thought were 3 really good friends at the time. And at the time, it didn't feel good. It definitely felt like I'm doing this for me, but at the same time, like, I've just made myself really lonely. And it wasn't a good feeling, but I knew I needed to do it if I wanted to continue to grow. So I did it. And maybe like a month or 2 ago, I let one of them back in. And last night I was having a conversation with one of them. And I was telling her about a new friendship relationship that I've been cultivating. And, you know, they said to me, well, in the past, you've said things like this. And I've told her, like, this is very different. I've grown so much over the years, blah, blah, blah. You know, I've told her all the things. Her response was, well, you know, you've said things like this before, so, you know, it's probably not going to be, and everything ends. And I'm like, no, I'm telling you this because, you know, you asked me questions like you were going to be supportive. I expect you to be supportive. Like, that's the type of friend that I would be. And again, these aren't going to be one-sided relationships where I show you all the support and you don't show me any support. So that's how that started. And they're like, well, I know you much better than this person that you just started creating a friendship with knows you. But do you? Do you? Because Do you actually know the person that I'm telling you that I am now? Do you know the person that went through all that growth and change over the past year? Or are you still operating out of the person that you met 3 years ago, or the person that you thought I was last year? You've not seen me in about 2 years. So who are you judging me by? Are you judging me by the person that you think I am now? Or are you judging me based on the person that you claim you've known and you know better? We had the part of the conversation yesterday about how she told me she knows me way better and this and that, and she could tell me all about myself. And something didn't quite sit right. So I messaged her this morning and said, I really felt like it was devaluing what I had said. And I don't believe that you know the version of me that went through all the growth when you weren't around, because you weren't around. I think you're operating out of the person that you think I was based on when you knew me. And I've been telling you that I'm not that person, but have you been listening? And that is a hard part. And while I was in the middle of having that conversation with her, I also realized the old version of me would have never had that conversation. I would have just left it alone and been like, okay, they just say this and it doesn't really matter, it doesn't hold a lot of weight. But if it's something that's bothering me, I should be addressing it. And it shouldn't just be that we try and create good relationships with, let's say, people that we're becoming boyfriend and girlfriend with, husband and wife with. Friends should be those good relationships too. And healthy communication needs to happen on all sides of whatever type of relationship it is. And so if I'm having an issue, I'm gonna feel the need to vocalize that, because that's not okay. And that is how we get one-sided relationships and how it feels like one person treats someone else better than the other. So I addressed it, and I realized how different I've become, how much I have changed in that moment. A lot of times people judge us based on the person that they knew. And they're not always able to adjust who you've become for many reasons. Sometimes it's because they've not seen it. Sometimes it's because they just don't understand it. And sometimes it's because they're used to that old version of you in their head. And that old version of you, maybe they could control. So having to change who you're thinking about and how you react and everything else, that's hard for people, because it's not just, no, you're not going to treat me this way. It's also, how am I treating somebody? You have to think about it both sides. What are you going to allow in? What aren't you going to allow in? And this kind of goes to last week's podcast of learning to figure out if somebody or something is the right fit for you or not. Someone isn't necessarily wrong about the person that they remember. Maybe you did behave a certain way. Maybe you did tolerate things that you wouldn't tolerate anymore. Maybe you were indecisive, reactive, afraid, insecure, or constantly looking for validation. You don't have to deny who you were to acknowledge who you have become. But somebody knowing your past does not automatically give them authority over your present either. Someone can know your history incredibly well and still know who you are now. Are there people in your life that are responding to the person that you were rather than getting curious about the person that you are now? Growth can make old relationships feel so different. You can change what fits and what doesn't. Relationships that worked before, when you had fewer boundaries, may struggle when you're trying to develop them now. People who were more comfortable with you always giving and overgiving may not like the fact that now you're saying reciprocating that is a requirement. Dynamics around you staying quiet can feel uncomfortable when you start speaking up. That doesn't automatically make either person bad or good. Sometimes that relationship was just compatible with the older version of you. Now you have to figure out whether or not the relationship can evolve too. Outgrowing a dynamic does not mean that you need to outgrow the person, but the relationship may have to change if it's going to continue. We've probably all said, "I'm different now." But growth isn't just proven by saying you've changed. It's demonstrated by what you do differently. How do you respond when you get triggered? What do you tolerate now? What do you walk away from? What conversations are you willing to have? What choices do you make when nobody's validating them? Do your current actions actually support the person that you say you've become? I feel like I gave a lot of examples to this person of how I did things differently. And they heard all of those, but they still chose to say, I know you better. But I'm telling you, I have done things differently. And if that didn't speak loud enough, the fact that I'm having the conversation with you about how that made me feel and how that's not okay, that should tell you right there that I am different and that I am doing things differently. And it should for anybody else. If you are making different choices and becoming a different version of yourself, and those actions are lining up with the person that you say you're becoming, then people shouldn't have a reason to say you're not that person. And they know the old version of you better. I could tell her all day that I'm different, but what struck me was the fact that I had that conversation showed that I'm different. Sometimes we are actually the ones holding on to that old version of ourselves. It's not always someone else. Other people aren't the only ones that do it. Sometimes we say things like, I've always been a people pleaser. I'm terrible at making decisions. I don't trust myself. I always pick the wrong people. I'm scared to change. That's just how I am. But is it? Or are you the one that's using 5-year-old evidence to define the person standing here in front of you today? Maybe you haven't stopped long enough to update your story. Maybe you haven't stopped long enough to update the story that you're telling yourself about yourself. Give yourself permission to meet you again. Ask yourself, who am I now? What do I believe today that I didn't believe a year ago? What am I no longer willing to accept? What have I learned? What feels important to me now? How do I handle situations differently? What old labels do I no longer fit? What parts of myself am I still discovering? And you're not going to need everybody's understanding of that version of you, but you do need to be willing to recognize them yourself. So maybe this episode isn't just about what version of me do you know? Maybe it's also, what version of yourself are you still getting to know? Because you are allowed to change. You are allowed to make decisions today that the person 2 years ago wouldn't have made. You are allowed to want different things, and you are allowed to look back at your life and realize, wow, I have changed. I don't think I would have handled it that way 2 years ago, or a year ago, or a week ago. Sometimes that realization is the proof that you've been growing. So this is your reminder that you don't need to have it all figured out. Change doesn't come from rushing it. It comes from paying attention and choosing yourself, even in the small ways. This has been another episode of The Inner Lunch, and I will see you in the next episode. Bye!